Welcome to the Colorado Lacrosse News Podcast, where we go beyond the scoreboard and into the people, programs, and culture shaping the game.
Today, we're joined by Dennis Joyce from LaxDadRecruiting. Dennis has gone through the recruiting process 3 different times as a parent and now helps families understand the realities of recruiting through his content online. We're talking about what parents and players often misunderstand, the pressure around recruiting, club choice, playing time, showcases, and what actually matters when trying to play at the next level. Welcome.
That's a big intro. Hopefully I can do all that. We'll see how that goes.
Well, let's dive into it. Who are you? And how did LaxDadRecruiting start?
Well, that's a good question. So who am I? I am literally a lacrosse dad like everybody else. I have just have a lot more gray hair and less of it. So, I've been through the wars. I've had a kid in high school lacrosse since 2013. I have 3 kids who played lacrosse. All 3, 2 of them have graduated or are in college, and I have one that's going to college next year. So I've been through the recruiting so many different times, and I've been in the old recruiting and the new recruiting. So I got a kind of a good view of the good and bad of both. So I am literally just a dad who gets asked a lot of questions. And how did this start? Was me, people asking questions and people going, man, you're really good at answering these questions for us. You should do some kind of podcast or something. And I'm like, yeah, go away. And then I was sitting at my son's last tournament of his junior, after going into his senior year. And I was like, oh, so I sat in my car and I recorded my very first video sitting in the car while waiting for his second game of the day to start. And then all of a sudden it's become a thing on its own. Just kind of exploded. Yeah, now I just answer a lot of questions and give my opinions and have fun with it.
It's great. You started probably, I think, about a year ago, if I or maybe a little bit
Yeah, a
more.
little less actually. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of got a mind of its own, but yeah.
Yeah, it's blown up really quickly, and I always get a kick out of it. Some of the questions that are asked that are like, straightforward questions that people like really need an answer, and then I feel like some people use your channel to complain about the situation that they may have placed themselves in.
There you go. That's the truth right there. Yeah, the funny thing is when I first I was very lucky. I live in a lacrosse hotbed. I'm in upstate Western New York, depending on your vernacular, in the Rochester area. So Rochester, Syracuse is a very big lacrosse area. So answers are pretty easy to find because there's somebody who's played or has a friend who played D1 or played pro. I could always find answers. And I'm the kind of person who asks lots of questions. So when I was going through the process, I would just find people and ask questions. And what I've realized through this process is I was an unbelievably lucky person to have those resources at my fingertips. So you said a lot of questions that people ask that are kind of like, yeah, of course that's and people just don't have access to what we would consider simple questions or things that are pretty, the ABCs of it. And I think if there's one thing I'm kind of taking pride in myself is I'm answering those ABC questions. And people feel silly asking because, why would you ask that question? It's such an obvious thing. And if you're from Long Island or Maryland, and even Colorado to an extent has become a hotbed area, those kind of questions might seem trivial, but if you're in Kentucky or southern South Carolina or Georgia, yeah, you're just literally flopping around trying to find somebody who can help. And I've become that for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely amazing. The other thing that I want to point out that if somebody doesn't follow your channel already that may not know, as a parent, and I completely respect this, you actually don't bring your kids into your discussions. And I think that is incredible. For somebody that's gone through the process, you talk about your experience going through it, not necessarily your kids' experience. And I think that's super important to point out because and I make sure I'm quoting you correctly here. This is not their story. This is my story, right? I don't need to
Yeah,
bring them in. which I think is
Yeah,
incredible.
that's absolutely true. I really wanna make sure because there's a lot of people online, and I respect a lot of the folks who are in the similar space giving advice, and they come from their own perspective. So there are a lot of guys who say, "Well, I was a former D1 coach and I da 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 da," or "I played," or "I went through the I never went through the recruiting process." And I'm so old that the recruiting process was completely different. They were sending VHS tapes out then. Um, but this story or the story that I'm telling or all the things I'm talking about are from my perspective as a lax dad sitting in my chair on the sidelines, filming video myself when I was doing it. So yeah, it's definitely a different perspective. And sometimes I stray out of it a little bit and I always have my opinion because everyone wants to hear my opinion, at least that's my wife does. But I try to avoid coaching things. I don't, talk about how to run a better defense. It's not my thing. But I can talk about how it feels to have your kid not play or get cut or that kind of stuff. But I am, yeah, absolutely looking from my perspective. It is certainly my story, and my kids would absolutely agree that I should not talk about them. Um, and I should definitely not give editorialize what I think happened in their lives. Yeah, and I do occasionally break my own rules, and I usually regret it, significantly when I do. And I don't mean tell their story, but I try my best not to talk about things that happened to my kids in specifics. Like, I don't talk about who recruited my youngest son. Like, we never talk about I never even tell where he's going to college. People can figure it out because 'cause I'm not hiding it either, but I don't talk about the things that specifically happened to him or the people we talk to. I talk in more generalities, and I'm telling people the stories, just leaving out some details that, I don't need to put people on blast because, there are good people and bad people. We don't need to kind of call them out. But yes, my try to be my story,
Yeah, and
good or bad.
everybody's gonna have a slightly different experience with different coaches and different
100%.
in this whole process because the process is very different. Let's dive into recruiting a little bit, and let's target this one straight to the parents. What are some of the biggest recruiting myths that parents believe that you hear the most? That you're like, no, come
Oh,
on.
there's so many. There's so many. I think that the where I see the biggest is the fear of missing out. If you don't get your kid into a top tier program, traveling in at least in the East Coast here, traveling from New York to Delaware to play in 3 or 4 events at 8, you're gonna fall behind. That whole myth of you're going to fall behind is what's killing our sport because it's driving you need to spend money to make money. You're not going to be successful if you're not. I often talk about that kind of trope in recruiting right now or in lacrosse in general. That's probably the biggest one. I think people are spending way too much money on it. There's not the return. Now, there's a lot more money in scholarships and money now than there was 10 years ago, but it's still not football and it's still not basketball. So the return on the investment's not very good. So I don't understand why people are spending as much. That would be the biggest one for me is if you don't do this, you're going to fall behind.
Yeah, it's interesting, and especially we see that in Colorado because the belief is you have to go to the East Coast to play. So the travel to the East Coast has become a really big thing, especially with younger players, which has been really interesting to watch that movement. And I even know that there's talking about just scholarships real quickly. One of the top high school players from 3 years ago. I'll just keep it kind of general went D1. Uh, really happy. First choice school that he wanted to go to got there. He doesn't get a dime. He's playing full ride, and he gets garbage minutes here and there, but that's what he wanted to do, and he knew that. But it's not, as one of the top players in the state, he didn't get a scholarship. He got to pay to go play D,
Pay or play.
and yeah.
Yeah, I made a video a while back talking about how sports parents in general are the greatest customers for universities because as a general rule, and this one always sets people off, we end up as sports parents sometimes paying more to send our kids to college than if they weren't. And people lose their minds on this one. But it's really simple. We get so excited about the opportunity to play sports that we stop being educated consumers. We stop shopping around. When the coach says, "Love to have you on the team," lights go on and you don't aren't being the educated consumer you want to be and looking for the best price and trying to get maximize the money, whether it be division 1, 2 or 3. There are ways to get more money out of universities, and a lot of times parents of athletes stop because they don't want to upset the coach. They are so happy to get that offer that they don't ask for more money. Now, I'm not saying that particular person in your example was going to get more money or not, but colleges use sports to generate revenue. You are a head in the bed. And yeah, yeah. So I guess one of my favorite topics because I can get a million people to yell at me for that one if I say it. But yeah, we're
Yeah.
terrible consumers.
Yeah, it's interesting. I also look at the fact that a lot of kids who D1 is a huge focus for a lot of kids. It tends to be, laser locked D1 or bust. And I don't think a lot of players, and this is something that's come up multiple times, and I like to reiterate so people realize just because you go to a D1 school does not mean you're traveling with the team, does not mean that you are even going to sit on the bench, doesn't even mean that you have a spot in the locker room, which is something that a lot of people don't realize when they're looking at that.
Yeah, that's certainly a true statement. The with the, we talk about the NCAA settlement with the influx. Now there are no more limitations on scholarships and which is all not true. There's still budget constraints. They just took away the number of scholarship problem, but the dollars didn't change. The amount of money these teams are getting to spend isn't going up, and they're trying to reduce the cost of non-revenue sports so that they can pay revenue sports. So, women's lacrosse, men's lacrosse, yeah, they're not traveling everybody. They have 48 guys in the roster. Maybe they're bringing 35. They're, leaving 10 at home. So yeah, in fact, that's one of the things I tell my people who are listening is, when you're talking to the coaches, does everyone travel? How do you handle practices? That kind of stuff is really big. And especially at the D3 level, you know, um, D3 level, they can have as many kids on the team as they want. There's no roster limits at D3. So there are some very, very large teams that, and they just changed the rule finally, which is a good thing that during the NCAA tournament, you were only allowed to dress so many kids. So you would go to an RIT Salisbury NCAA game and there'd be 20 guys dressed in t-shirts and shorts sitting on the sidelines who are kids on the team, but they weren't allowed to be dressed. In some cases, they had to sit in the stands in the front row and sit there. So yeah, it's a big deal. You could be on a team and not on a team. You can get red shirted. You can get gray shirted at D3. There are all kinds of traps that you can fall into that, kind of take the shine off of the apple, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. Um, since we already started talking about D3, let's go down that hole. D3 is a very different beast for a lot of programs. And yes, it gets overlooked. Um, but one of the things that I have noticed, and I believe you actually talked about this in one of your snippets, is the level of players at D3, especially if you're looking at Salisbury, RIT, Bowdoin right now. Like some of these programs are really stepping up. In the girls' world, you're looking at Middlebury, phenomenal women's program. Like Dynasty has been that way since Missy Foote was there.
Yes.
Like if we're going way back, right? Phenomenal program. And these the talent that are at these programs are D1 talent that decided to do something a little differently.
Yeah, that's certainly true. I just did a video on it where I talked about why does it happen? Because I went to the RIT, um, RIT RPI game, and I was like, wow, it was the guys were flying around, and my comment in the whole video was like, how are these kids here? They're fantastic players. And I kind of put them in two categories. There are the kids who chose because maybe they're an engineering student, maybe they want to study law, maybe they just didn't want to be owned by a D1 program and they chose to go D3, especially if you're going to high academics like the NESCACs. There's great reasons to choose them. And then there's the other kids where I have a friend who's the coach of at a highly ranked D3 school, and he said that when roster limits came into place a couple years back, or at least the talk about them a couple years back, he said it was the greatest thing he's ever seen for him because there would always be kids that would fall through the cracks, and then he'd scoop them up, and now it's like he called a shooting fish in a barrel. There are so many kids that are falling, in his mind, falling to D3 that he's like, I'm getting the quality of the players that I'm recruiting now has quadrupled. Like they are so much better than they were 5 years ago because some of these kids would absolutely have been the 11th, 12th, 13th kid in the recruiting class for a good school. And now they're just coming to him and he's snatching them all up. So the quality of players at Division III has exploded. And it's a fantastic way of, my son played D3 and my daughter played D1 and my youngest son's going to play D1. My oldest son had the best experience because he went and played lacrosse. He went to school. He could be a regular student. He wasn't owned by the school. It was a much different experience. He didn't get any money, but I think he had a much better experience. And if you hear them talking at the dinner table, one had a job and one played lacrosse.
Yeah, it's interesting. Looking at D3 and one of my friends always joked, she goes, a lot of my friends went D1. She played for a really good program in Connecticut. And she was like, yeah, a lot of my friends went D1 and they were all communication majors. I actually got to choose my major. And that was the running joke of, it's like, oh, I can play D1 and be a communications major, which falls into, going to those other schools, you might have more availability. And that's something that a lot of people don't realize is that when you go D1, there's certain degrees that you cannot pursue with that program because it
Nursing.
does not work with the schedule.
Nursing's the biggest one you talk to on the girls' side, and that side too. Nursing is a great profession because of the labs and the practical work you need to do. It doesn't work. And then if you go and tell your coach you want to do it, there are some programs that work it out. Now, I'm not saying there aren't, but you'll have coaches push you to a different major. Why don't you try this? It's like nursing. It says accounting. Yeah, but it's like nursing. You're nursing numbers. So try that. You'll like it. So yeah, there's a lot of things that it's just not practical to be a D1 athlete and with all the commitments and still take a major that requires a lot of lab work or a lot of practical work or a lot of internships. Yeah, you do limit what you can do. You can make it work. People do, but it's difficult. It's very difficult. I
Yeah,
think people
it's
underestimate they underestimate D1. People always think, "Oh, it's a lot of work." It's a lot of work. It's an incredibly a high amount of lifts and conditioning and practice and travel. Travel is the one no one ever thinks about. If you're flying, my daughter was flying from Nashville to LA to play a game, and they're leaving on the Wednesday for a Saturday game because they have to adjust to time zones and the travel's so long, and you're like, well, yeah, I can be a regular student. It's very difficult.
I think it's a good example as you think when Syracuse men came out to Colorado, they played Air Force and Denver. They were here for almost a week. They came out, they were here way in advance, practicing, getting used to elevation to play 2 games. And they scheduled it so that they were here for that amount of time. And that's a lot
And
of not classroom time.
so how do you explain and now there are schools and there's nothing wrong and this is a good thing. There are schools and there are professors who work with the athletes to make them successful. My daughter is in a school, a very high academic school that they were very, very good about allowing, things to be moved around and tests to be moved and everything else. But I have friends who absolutely were told, you will not miss exams. You will not you will not skip class. And like, well, we're getting on a plane. Don't care. So yeah, it's very important when you're talking about this, and with any school, you should talk about things like playing time, obviously, but you should also talk about how do you handle labs? How do you handle, I have to miss practice on every Thursday for a lab? Some coaches are like, yeah, I understand. And some coaches are like, you better figure that out, do it somewhere else. You know, yeah, it's very, very difficult to manage that school part with the lacrosse part. And the lacrosse coaches aren't necessarily getting raises if you get A's.
Yeah.
So,
You have 2 jobs. You have 2 jobs.
yeah, and I used to talk to my daughter all the time because she was going to a very expensive school, but she was getting a nice, package. And I used to say, sometimes she'd complain and be like, I wish I was a regular student. And I go, well, remember that a regular student would still have to pay the same bill, and that's a lot of hours being a barista, to get that money that you're getting for lacrosse. So understand that, they are paying, at least at the D1 level, you're getting paid, and it is a job, but it is a job that pays really well by the hour. So, you know, gotta
Yeah.
balance that out.
Let's drop back, and I wanna touch on something that you, hit earlier. Were you talking about, kids joining the process too early, especially with clubs and the traveling and stuff like that? I think it's a really important topic to talk about. And this is very opinion based because and I'm not meaning to put a target on your back, but when do you think that kids should be starting that process and looking at clubs and that travel uh, to quote unquote be seen?
So that's 2 different things, and that's the important. So there's this whole idea that I wanna play with a good team and practice with good players and get good competition. I see kids doing it. I think you should be playing lacrosse, right? So if your 3rd grader can play lacrosse on a team somewhere, that's great. Does it have to be a club team that travels? And that's where the fuzziness becomes out. I am a proponent of play as much lacrosse as you can. I would love to see, when my oldest was involved, we had a town team. Our town team played all the other town teams in the area. We would play 3 or 4 tournaments over the summer. The furthest drive we did was an hour and a half to the other side of Syracuse. And we were playing very good competition for 4th graders or 5th graders. And that was fantastic. Now, we are in a little bit of a hotbed area, so it was great players. We were playing against future D1 players at 4th grade. But I think that's what's really important. If you can do that in a regional, where you are staying close to home, where you go to a tournament, come home and sleep in your own bed, that's the most optimal thing you can. There's no reason you have to spend the tremendous amount of money to play at 4th grade. There are no elite 4th graders out there, right? That's the big thing. So go and play and have fun. Yeah, you might have to play, widen that area out a little bit to find really good competition. I don't think you need to travel across the country for, in your case. That's what I think. So I think playing is really important at the younger ages. When you start talking about recruiting, that's a different animal. So I think that we shouldn't even have the words exposure or recruiting coming out of anyone's mouth until they're in high school. And even then, I don't even like talking about it with freshmen. And in fact, I've said a video where I said, if you're going into your sophomore year, so the summer before your sophomore year, this is your last chance to go play fun lacrosse and play good competition, own your skill, get better, but no one's watching you. This whole myth pushed out by social media that coaches are putting their lists together and they're watching 4th grader. No, they're not. They're too busy, doing their own thing, finding the best players. They're not looking at what in that case, 29s right now. They're looking at the 28s and they're still looking at 27s. So I think that sometimes the clubs exasperate this by making it the most important summer of your life. Or, social media, look online, they have the best 31s being ranked by so and so. It's all BS. So when you start talking about recruiting, I say freshman year, you start thinking about recruiting a little bit. Sophomore year, you're absolutely in the middle of it. Junior year, you're in the mix, you're deep in the mud. And senior, you get to enjoy lacrosse again. So up until you're a high school student, exposure, being seen, all that nonsense is useless. It should all be about getting better, having fun. Because kids who have fun playing lacrosse are better at lacrosse. It's a crazy thought.
Yeah, I can relate in a different way. I come from a very big lacrosse family, and we I chose to be a skier when I had to make my choice. And I didn't become a professional. I didn't go pro in skiing because I was the best in my age group when I was younger. It was because I absolutely loved it and I kept doing it. And which is a really interesting thing to me because I look at some of the kids and I was probably middle of the pack and even in high school. And looking at the kids that I competed, most of them just burned out. And
Yes.
because I loved it, I kept going and I did really well. Was I one of the top in professionals? No, but I got to do what I love to do and I made money doing it. And that's a really cool thing for a lot of people. Uh,
It's such a wonderful thing to hear. Yeah, I think that we lose the commercialization of youth sports in general, at what, $5 billion business now, has really stolen the joy out of playing a sport. And, it's a job, and you hear parents talk about it like, because they're making a tremendous investment in their kids. And when you start spending that type of money on the development of your child at such a young age, you stop, not everybody, not everybody, but a lot of them stop treating their kids as their children and start treating them like little businesses that they're running. And they have to shape it and move it and make sure they're working on a personal nutritionalist for their 9-year-old and the strength trainer and the speed trainer because they're building a little business. And that's just a recipe for burning your kid out. And they're just gonna be like, I don't want to do this anymore. This isn't fun. I want to go play with my friends. So I always tell people, I said, when your kids are younger, if they just want to go fishing, go fishing. It's okay. Skip the workout today. It'll be there tomorrow. It's not, you're not being a loser if you're enjoying your life. And I think that, yeah, we steal a lot of the joy out of the sports we all enjoy. Like growing up, I mean, I used to go and play sports with my friends in the yard, play in the street, manhole to manhole, stickball. It was because it was just fun. We do it all day long. Now we wouldn't be able to do that. We'd have 5 parents running it and with a computerized roster limit and, so we as parents have messed things up pretty good. And then private equity has helped.
yeah, that's a whole nother beast of a topic. But touching on it a little bit, um, looking at the club world, which has really really grown, and one of the things that people focus on, and I know the area that you've grown in, I know the programs that are around there, because I'm not from that area, but I know it very well coming from Quebec originally, is uh, how important do you think club choice is?
I think the biggest thing is I don't one of the things that I tell parents all the time is you have to understand not necessarily where you're projecting your kid to be, 'cause it's very hard. No one knows how good your 10-year-old's going to be, right? But you have to know what your expectations are. What do you wanna get out of this? Because not everyone has the same expectations. So I think you have to do a personal inventory and you got to decide what it is that you want out of this experience. Because for me, I always had a very clear understanding what I wanted. I wanted exposure from the recruiting. We got to that recruiting age, right? That was the only thing I cared about. I didn't care about anything else. But there are a lot of people who know I want the best coaching. I want you know, or I want this, or I want mentoring. There's a lot of reasons that a lot of clubs offer a lot of different things coming out of it. They're not all the same. So when you understand what you want out of it, what your child wants out of it, it's easier to go and figure out what club it is. I think parents sometimes are like, well, what's the best club in the area? Oh, it's Sweet Lax. I got to go to Sweet Lax. And you're like, well, Sweet Lax is a little bit of an animal, right? There's a lot of or Monster. My daughter played for Monster. I love Ronnie Davis and those guys. They did everything they said they were going to do. They did for us. But he would start every practice was, you know, I brought 3 other girls in today. I'm probably cutting 3 of you. We'll see how practice goes. Every practice. My daughter loved it. It was like fantastic. She's like, yeah, cutthroat, let's play. But there are people who that is the absolute worst environment to be in. Now, her class, the 22 class, had like 21 or 22 Division I players on that team. So that environment worked for some. But if you don't know that and your expectations, I want my kid to have fun and make some friends, that's not a good club for you. And Sweet Lax has its own, nuances in how they build stuff and how they bring kids in and how they do guest players. So you really need to do a self-evaluation. What do you want out of it? Because oftentimes when I talk to parents and they're telling me that, oh, this club or this so-and-so, or the experience I had was bad, it's not that the club did anything wrong or the club wasn't being the club. It's purely my expectations didn't match up with what they delivered. It's a business. They're offering a service. You need to understand what service you want before you go shopping for it. And I think if you do that as a parent, you will be so much happier with this process. I just think that right now, people are just saying, what's the best club? I got to be on it. And it rarely works that way. Sometimes it does, but rarely.
The best club is all perspective. Just because they are top in the rankings doesn't mean they're the best club. And that's the interesting thing. Like you said, it's looking at, what are you looking? Are you looking for top? If you're looking for your daughter, is that a top female coaches that are going to be great role models for her as people,
Or a
not
psycho
just as coaches?
50-year-old who yells at him.
Yeah,
They
right.
both work.
It does. I've cleanly seen clubs where you go in and they're like, your playing time, even in middle school, your playing time is based on how well you play. And if you're not playing well, you will get benched. And for some kids, that is not going to set them up for success. And for some kids, they're going to be like, hell yeah, let's go.
And the thing is, most of the clubs won't hide that from you. They're very honest because what they want is happy customers who give them more money. So they don't want to bring people in. So if you ask them, how do you handle this situation? They'll say, we play only the best players and we might only go 13 on the bench today. Oh, okay. You have 25 kids there. That's okay. If that's okay with you, then it's not a problem. For a lot of parents, driving to Delaware and not watching their kids play is not a fun experience. For some people, they're just excited to be there. That's why it's rarely will you see a club will lie about what they're going to deliver. It's just not in their best interest. They'll tell you how they run their club. Oftentimes, we don't hear because we're not listening. We're only looking at, oh, they were at Naptown last year and they won it. They're great. We're not hearing that, 15 kids never got on the field that championship game. Right? Again, I'm not saying that's bad. That's how they run their club. That's how they run their business. It's your responsibility as a parent to ask the questions, listen to the answer, and actually digest it. And you'll be happier because there's a right club for everyone, just like there's a right college for everybody. You just have to do your homework. Educated consumers.
Yeah, I think that's good. And it's also make sure, like, ask the club when you're going to the tryouts for that program and they say, hey, we're, congratulations, we choose you. Ask how they set up. They will communicate, they will tell you. And I think that's a really important thing that parents miss. And it's part of the process that they need to be involved in.
Yeah.
Speaking
And people
of
don't ask the
parent,
question.
yeah.
People don't ask the question. That's the big thing. Ask, they will tell you. And people are like, I don't want to ask. I don't want them to think that I'm. No, it's a business. They're running a business. They'll tell you.
Yeah, very much so. Let's talk about parent involvement a little bit because I think
Every time you mention parents, I sigh. Have you noticed
I
that
know.
yet?
Yeah. I hit all the hot topics. So, how much do you think parents should be involved? Where should parents start drawing the line and being like, this is my kid and let them do their thing?
In what sense do you mean? Do you mean from a recruiting
I
perspective?
mean,
Because that's a
recruiting,
whole
recruiting, but also within their lacrosse growth. I mean, we could look at it in two different ways. Let's look at parent involvement in just the kid's journey as a player.
So again, I'm old. So, my involvement in my kids' program, I ran a 350 person youth organization here in the Penfield, New York area. And we kept it running. I coached all of my kids up until, you know, fourth, fifth, sixth grade, um, because that's what we do here, right? So, obviously, I'm probably an outlier in how much I'm involved because I was coaching, I was running the league, I was doing everything else. I was a ref for 7 years. I have a lot involved. I don't think that parents should shy away from being involved. I think there's sometimes we either go on extremes. Right? Extremes are never good. So parents sometimes like, I don't have anything to, I don't even go to practice. I slow the car down and I push him out and he does everything on his own. And if he's not going to work out on his own, okay, that's one way of doing it. And then there's the smothering parents who are, running the orange slices onto the field at every time the whistle blows. Probably not good either. I think that at the youth level, involvement's good. Playing catch with your kid. That's the kind of involvement parents really should be engaged in. Going out there and playing catch and having fun and having great conversations about the games, about what the kid thinks happens. Less editorializing and more listening. At that age, that's really important. I think parents get a little wonky trying to do the recruiting part too early and really start to shape their kid and get them exposure and all that kind of jazz. Leave that for later. Go play catch. Now, your kid will appreciate it a lot more in 10 years than you imagine. Recruiting, I think that's where we're going next. That's
Yeah. Oh,
really the
yeah.
one.
Exactly.
So I have I have talked to hundreds of kids about recruiting. And I do meet kids who will sit there and say, well, I started the process myself. I sent out 50 emails. They're all custom made. I made a resume that I attached to all my emails and I cut all the film up together. I actually composed the music for each of the videos myself. And you're like, okay, you're the greatest 15-year-old kid I ever met in my entire life. God bless you, right? There are
Amazing.
kids out there who they're in charge. It's their life. They're running it. That's 4% of the people I deal with.
Generously.
All the other 96% of parents are like, I'm telling them to send emails out. They say they're gonna do it. They don't do it, and it's terrible. And then I have to we fight and we yell at the kitchen table about him not doing it. And I think most parents fall in that category because kids don't have a sense. Most kids do not have a sense of urgency, and you don't have to be neurotic about it. There is a timetable for things. When you're ending your freshman season, you should start thinking about how are you going to get video? Are you going to record yourself? Have you ever cut video together and done editing? Have you ever done music and sequencing? Have you ever done that? Be a good time to start practicing that stuff. Have you ever had kids today don't know how to write? An email, like a legitimate email. My kids, I have to explain email to my daughter all the time. I'm like, here's how we send the email out. Yeah, address them that way. Yeah, and like they don't do this as a normal basis. They text and they, send snaps and stuff like that. So it's an uncomfortable world for them. So the expectation for that 96% of kids that you're not going to be involved and you're just going to like leave them over there, you're going to be frustrated as a parent. They're going to be overwhelmed with anxiety and guilt. They're still not going to do anything because they're teenagers and they're obstinate. And it's just going to be a bad situation. So I think it's perfectly okay. And this is what I did to help. I use the word help, not do. Um, it's okay to, hey, I think we should write an email. This is probably the way I'd start it. Do you think that sounds good? Yeah, that sounds good. Okay, why don't you type that down? And then you probably should say something you like about the school. "Well, I don't know what I like about the school. Well, let's go online and look at the school and see what, anything catch your eye or the program and help them work through the process because it is foreign to them. They don't do this on a regular basis. So the expectation that they're not going to need your help or that you're not going to be involved is silly. It's just going to frustrate you. Help, not do. And that's the line. It's like your science project for your fifth grader. We've all been there, right?
Love
It's
it.
very
I love
hard
it.
to only help and not do. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think that there's an expectation in the recruiting process that people sometimes get in the mode of like, well, if they don't want it, they're not going to do it. I'm like, well, that's certainly a true statement. I'm not going to argue with you, but they need help. Most kids need help, and they need help with the first one. And then when the most amazing thing in the recruiting process for me was watching my youngest son, and my daughter was in COVID. So everything was the recruiting in COVID was a
That
disaster.
was
We don't even.
it was a mess. Yeah.
So I always use my youngest son as an example. The first time he spoke to a coach, I was listening at the door because I had him. And it was the most brutal conversation you have ever been involved in your life. Uh, yeah, no, I play. Yeah, I like lacrosse. Yeah, what kind of ice cream? Vanilla. Uh huh. Yeah. And I was like, oh my god. But you should see him on the phone now. After how many calls he's had with different coaches, and he is like an insurance salesman. Hey, how you doing? Yeah, no, we had a great game last night. Yeah, it worked out great. Yeah, you're like, this is not the same kid. The growth of him over this process, and I'm perfectly honest, and if he's in the other room, I think, so he's probably hearing me. Helping him get the ball rolling is what he needed. And now he's completely capable of sending emails and communicating with adults, and it's a process. You just got to get the ball rolling. Push
They're
the down.
great. They're great life skills that they're gonna need, and I think that's super important.
Yeah. So I think parents have to be involved at all the levels. It's more of a help, not do. Everyone knows when it's the parents are doing. No one. I have coaches talk to me all the time. They're like, I know this kid didn't write this email.
Yeah.
Just I know it.
It's pretty clear sometimes, gut based. Here you go. So, there's a new trend in recruiting that, I'd love to hear your thoughts on, where there's
I will have gray
actually
hair. New is not something I do
well,
very.
hey, I'm not too, dark myself these days. Um, that there are actually, for lack of a better term, agents or recruiting experts that, you can now hire to help you with the recruiting process. I'd love to dive into that a little bit. Is that something that's worth the money? Is that gonna set people up for success?
My normal so people reach out to me. I don't charge for any of the advice or any of the stuff I do. I answer everyone's email. It's not a business for me. This is paying it forward for me. But
Mhm.
I do have people reach out to me and say, "Would you like to do this for me?" And I'm like, "No, I don't." But there are plenty of people out there who will offer recruiting services. And there's a certain line between because it's a the recruiting process is involved, right? There's a you have to invest time in it. And for a lot of people, maybe because they have a lot of other kids, they have a big family, or their work it is very taxing, that spending some money is much less expensive in the long run than their time. So it's okay to have someone help them pretty much do what I did with my kids, which was get the ball rolling. So I think that some of these folks who are helping you craft emails, I always say that the best conversation you can have with your kids is when you're driving from a tournament and you just say, what are you thinking about colleges? You going to a big school or a little school, a city school, a urban, a country school, a rural area? Those are the kind of conversations that these people have with your kids, where they're just trying to pull out, where do you want to go? Where do you think you can go? What are your grades? Let's match those up. All those conversations that they do can be done by yourself. But if you have the money and not the time, those services can be fantastic. Those are a certain level of service where they're helping you with the recruiting process. And I don't think necessarily that's what you were asking about. I think you were asking about the other side of the equation, which are the people who say, I have a laundry list of coaches that I can get you in front of. And I know a bunch of these guys, and they charge a lot of money, a lot of money. The guys who are helping you get the ball rolling charge a fee. These guys charge a lot of money. And what they're doing is they're leveraging their network to get your film, your name in front of the right people. And I would love to sit here and say, it's a ripoff and you shouldn't do it. And it's a complete waste of time. But I've seen some of them, and I'm not going to name names here, but there are some of them that absolutely do what they promise, that they have a network. But your kid has to be good. They can't take a kid who's a D3 player and get him to Georgetown. But they can get a kid who's probably at the level of Georgetown and get him to Yale, or they can get him to Michigan. If you have the talent, they can shop your talent just because they have the connections. Now, what I would say is that's the job of your club director or your recruiting director in your club. They should be providing that service. A lot of clubs suck at that. Again, when you're shopping for clubs, what do you want out of the club? Some of the clubs just don't do that real well. And that's where these guys slide in. And they provide the service that you, in theory, already paid for with your club. They're just going to augment that and now put you in front of the right people. Get people to watch your film. Get people interested in it. So those people, they're expensive. If you're the right player, it can be really beneficial. If you're the wrong player, it's a waste of money.
Yeah, I
And
think
sometimes the problem is sometimes they won't tell you that, right? They're
no,
not
because
big. It's
they're
what
businesses as well, and that's fair, and that's completely understandable. I do think that's a really important part that we really need to highlight in what you just said is if you're playing for a club and the reason you're playing for that club is to play in college, they should be helping you with that process. And I think
100.
that's really an important piece to highlight is that is part of what you're paying for. And that is one of those questions you should be asking along with playing time. If we're committing and joining this club coming into high school, is this something that you're going to help us with?
Yeah, I will give you an example of that for my son and my daughter, both of them. When we got to, middle of the summer, well, maybe beginning of the summer, we had meetings with them. They said they would go, "Where do you think you can play?" Both the boys and the girls, Sweet Lax and Monster. Where do you want to play? And you had to submit to them your 5 or 7 schools that you're aiming at. And they would have really hard conversations with a lot of players. You're not going to UNC. You're not going to play at USC if you're a girl. You're not playing at BC. You're probably more the Mercer area. Nothing wrong with Mercer, but that's probably where you are going to be. So we need to change your goals here because if you can still aim for these schools. You're going to fail. Like that's the hard part of being a club director and being a recruiting director is having that conversation where you have to readjust what people's expectations are or they're just going to waste their time. Because there's a lot of people who can play really, really good D3 lacrosse and have a fantastic experience, but they're going to chase and spend a tremendous amount of money going after a level of lacrosse they can't go to. And that's where these people who help you, whether it's your club director or an outside agent, they should be directing you to where you're going to be successful. The good clubs, the ones you hear about, the ones who put 21 of their 22 kids in Division I programs, they have very hard conversations with their kids. They aim their kids to where they can be successful. Some might be upset by that, don't steal dreams from kids, but they're in the business of finding kids homes, and that requires sometimes to adjust the architectural diagrams of where you're going. So, yeah, that's absolutely one of the big things when you're looking for clubs. What do you want them? Because there are clubs out there who it's just not their thing, man. They're gonna help you get to the local college that's down the road from you because that's who they have connections to. I was lucky that the directors of the clubs my kids were involved with literally have a Rolodex. Well, they don't have, not that old. They have every coach on their phone and can make calls. And, we were like, oh, my daughter goes, oh, I'm thinking about maybe I should go and contact USC. He goes, I already did. Called her up. Da, 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 da. Okay. I mean, that's the kind of connections they have. I have friends whose kids are like, they would ask their club director to make a phone call for them, and they'd be like, I'll try to get to it next week if I can't, and you're like, expectations, expectations. But that's okay if you just want to go down the block and play at the local school. That's cool. I mean, there's levels for everything.
And I think the other thing to point out is it's not just clubs. Having been a high school coach and stuff, I would make those coach calls to coaches for high school players, and I would talk to those because, believe it or not, a lot of people that I played with or my sisters played with have gone on to be coaches and are coaching college, and it's amazing how the lacrosse world is not as big as most people think it is. It's actually
Very
really
really.
small. It's really small,
So
and
one of the yeah.
your high
So
school
let me
coaches can help you.
oh, they help so much. And high school coaches get dumped on in my comments, like, all the time. Like, and again, the game is expanding, so yes, the former softball coach may be coaching lacrosse in a small school in Kentucky right now, and he's doing his darndest to figure this out. So I understand that in some places, the lacrosse coaches aren't as strong as they can be, but that's irrelevant when we're trying to find a school. I tell every single person, like, my son went to, the Cornell prospect day. He went to his coach, high school coach, said, "Coach, can you call the Cornell coach?" And he goes, "Yeah, I'll give him a call." Now he doesn't know the guy, he just call him, "Hey, I'm da da da. I'm sending my player there." He goes, "Ah, I'll keep an eye out for him." Da, da, da. Walks in the door, and the guy goes, "Hey, I talked to your coach before the thing. I'm looking forward to watch you play." College coaches respect high school coaches more than parents respect high school coaches because they know that the club coaches are getting paid to say nice things. That's why you're paying them, right? The club director is always going to put a smiley face on and push his kids because it's good marketing for his club. High school coaches who are making the effort, who are getting paid $3,000 a year in a stipend, are not necessarily going to reach out for the kid who's a jerk. They're going to do it for the kids they like. I think they can help and they respect that. So they really lean on high school coaches more than parents give them the time for. They say, "Oh, he doesn't even know." It doesn't matter. He knows you're a good person or a bad person. He knows you're a good teammate or a bad teammate. That's the kind of stuff that coaches are really sometimes makes the difference between them taking you and not taking you. Is how are you going to fit on this team? And high school coaches give them an insight because they're not getting paid to say nice things. They're saying nice things because you are a good person and that matters. And
That's
oh my god,
I love that.
high school coaches get dumped on all the time in my comments, and it's horrible. And I have had the greatest high school coaches ever for my kids, and they have been such resources in recruiting. I can't. I am the pom pom waving high school coach person in recruiting. Use your high school coaches; they can be so valuable.
I love that. I love that. So let's wind it down. I feel like you and I could talk for quite a while on this, and
I am all
it's
yours. You ask as many
it's
questions
good.
as you want. This
But
is
let's
my style for my channel. Ask as many questions as you possibly can.
well, we might have to save it for another episode down the road. But let's do a
Fair
couple
enough.
quick hitters here. Just some
Very
quick
hard for me.
questions.
I don't do quick.
I
I
know
do
it's going to be
long.
a challenge for you, but it'll be fun. Um, let's start right now with showcases or camps.
Depends on what you wanna get out of it. If you love a school, it's your dream school, it's the place you think you can be very successful at, I'm a big fan of prospect days. I think they're great because 'cause you're gonna get that coach locked in. If you're still like, "I just wanna be seen," showcases give you the broadest reach, but you're only gonna get a coach's attention for a small amount of time. So it's really, are you locked in a school or are you not? Are you still, like, shooting a shotgun versus a rifle? Right? That's how it works. But I love prospect days. I love showcases when they're used appropriately. That's as short as you're gonna get for an answer. I'm sorry.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful, and it's a really good way of looking at it. All right, I know you've touched on this before, but I think it's a fun topic. Starter on a low ranked team or bench on a top team.
Yeah, someone just asked this question. You're stealing stuff from
Really?
my
That's awesome.
file. This one's tough. It really depends on the player. Some players just can't be backups. They just can't. It just drives them insane. It ruins their mentality. It can actually be a huge detriment. And so being a starter on a low team, especially high school matters. I hate to say it. It hurts me to say it. High school matters so little in terms of recruiting. So if you're okay with playing with not playing, but you like the practices and you like the jersey, there's no real downside to it. In fact, there could be an upside because coaches look at it as you're getting 80 something practices against really, really good competition. Even if you're a bench player, you're gonna get better. But playing is important too. So it's really the decision for the players and how they approach it and what they can accept because some players just can't do it.
Very fair. Very fair. Biggest recruiting red flags.
Communication. The coaches should be on their best behavior when they're dealing with you in the recruiting process. You are getting a view of them at their very, very best. They're courting you, right? This is their first few dates. If they treat you poorly in the first few dates, how are they going to treat you in the middle of the season? So that's my biggest thing. Communication. If they're early in the recruiting process, they are poor communicators, it's probably a sign that they're going to be really bad when you get there. That's my opinion.
Perfect. How about green flag?
Love. Love. If a coach loves you and wants you and you can feel that and they watched you play and they've seen you multiple times and they talk about wanting you, that's the best thing in the entire world. I think people underestimate this. Go somewhere where the coach wants you. Where they want they're not it's a big difference between the 1, 2, or 3 on on their recruiting board and being the last guy they bring in. It matters. Go where people want you. Love is a great thing from a coach.
Don't chase the name of the school. The number of players that I've had that have gone to a school and then ended up transferring out through the portal because they were like, this was not what I expected it to be is surprising. All right. What's one thing that every freshman should do?
Create a profile, a recruiting profile on either IWLCA or IMLCA. It's gonna be the repository for all your information, for recruiting, all your film, all your stats, all your grades, all your everything. It's gonna be the one place coaches are gonna look. And when you are getting looked up, if a coach sees you, gets your name, they type your name into Google and type, John Smith, lacrosse, that's going to be the first thing that pops up. Create that in your freshman year and then use the net over the next few months to populate it. Because as a freshman, you don't have all the information you need because you don't have any grades, you don't have, but as time goes on, just keep building up that profile, adding stuff. It is the most important thing. It's the filing cabinet of your lacrosse life. So create it as a freshman. And it's free.
Beautiful.
And it's
Yeah,
free. Even better.
it's phenomenal. It's a great opportunity. What's one thing every parent should stop doing?
Yelling at the officials. I
Love it.
I I sh just shh, be quiet. Be quiet on the sideline. My father used to go to my games, and people would wonder if he fell asleep. He just sat there quietly and would just sit there. I think half because he didn't understand what was going on, but the other half was because it wasn't his place, and I've taken that. I can be as loud as anyone else, and when someone screws up, sometimes it will come out. But as a general rule, I just watch the game. Coaches are watching the parents. It is 100% true. Ask any coach, especially the higher you go or the lower you go. The higher you go, they just don't want the problems. Lower you go, they're just like, I don't need this. If you're a lunatic parent, you're hurting your kid. Just
I have to laugh at that. I There's two things that I tell parents as a coach, especially as I've started doing more rec and younger programs, is Don't yell at the ref. That's my job, and I love it. And there was actually an incident this season where I called a timeout in the middle of a middle school lacrosse game. And the refs were like, oh, gosh, because I walked straight onto the field and they were ready. And I was like, no, I'm not talking to you. And they were like, uh-oh. And I went right over to the parents section on the other side. And I told them if they didn't stop yelling at the ref, I was going to ask them to leave to my own team's parents.
Good.
And I
That's
think
what
it was,
parents need that.
yeah, it's one of those super, super things that reffing is a hard job. Yes, there's tons of times where a ref makes a call that I'm like, what are you doing? Right? Especially as a coach, because we see it all.
Mhm.
But you know what? It is one of the jobs that I don't want. Have I taken the ref's test? Oh, yes. Could I be a ref? Yes. Do I want that job? Not in a million years, but I have so much respect for those that do it, especially when you have the younger high school kids that are doing it. And you're
Yeah.
like, good for you.
It's a great way. Honestly, it's fantastic. But I also tell people, like, especially at the high school level, remember, there's a hot mic above your head. You're being recorded as well. So I have seen many, many videos where you're kind of perusing clips and you're hearing parents just being horrific. So you're always
Yeah,
be careful. You're being recorded.
I love that. All right. If a parent or player listening could remember one thing from this conversation, what would you want it to be?
Don't stress. Everything kind of works out. And I know that's like, very cliche, but this process, as chaotic as it can seem, kids do find homes. Like, they will. It always seems to work out. Now, you have to do some planning and you have to do your diligence and you have to do things. And yes, sometimes you have to spend a lot of money. That's just unfortunate. That's the nature of the beast. But the stress that I see parents going through is insane. It will work out. It just enjoy playing the game, go to the games, enjoy it, play hard, send your emails out, do the things you need to do, and it'll work out. It may not be your dream school, right? Because not everyone gets their dreams, but you'll find a home if you do the process normally. It's just the stressing and the craziness and the worry and the anxiety. It's just not necessary. Just let the process roll. It's a slow process. It's going to feel like it's the fastest process in the world because you're going to hear about kids committing on, 1201. They're committing to schools on September 1st. But for most kids, it's a process that takes a long time, and it's not something you want to rush anyway. So just ride it out. You'll be fine.
And it doesn't matter if you hear on the stroke of midnight, you're getting calls, or it's 2, 3 days later or months later.
It it
Yeah,
it d it just
you're going to
it
hear.
honestly, it works out. And that's the one thing, it's just like, I think I've had like multiple videos where I'm like, "Okay, in and out." What we're doing right now, for the 27 parents, we're gonna breathe, because it just feels like everyone has more traction than you. It will work out. It will all work out.
Yeah, that's so good. Dennis, thank you so much for your time today. It has been an absolute pleasure talking to you and diving into this. I'm sure we could, as I said earlier, we could dive in for quite a while. But if you're not following Dennis, go check out his page. It's LaxDadRecruiting on Instagram. Are you on any other
TikTok
channels and
and TikTok.
TikTok? So head on over and check him out on TikTok as well. And if you have any questions, feel free to hit them his way. He answers comments all the time.
I answer them
So
all the time. I will answer your questions, and if anyone actually watches this and we wanna do a follow-up, this was fun. I enjoyed it. Feel free to reach out, and we can dive deeper and let me babble on more and more.
all right, I love it. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Colorado Lacrosse News Podcast. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, follow us on social, and visit coloradolacrosse.news for rankings, features, and full episode coverage.